Are you like me and you get frustrated because you want to enjoy your wine, but swirling it manually is for peasants, and you're far too rich and important to do that? So, thankfully, I do have a solution today. We're going to make a cup that's going to do this for you without you having to hurt your delicate, rich person wrists like this.
If you've ever been in a chemistry lab, you're probably familiar with those machines that stir your chemicals for you, where you drop one of these little pill looking things in your glass and it starts spinning without being touched, almost like magic. Sometimes people like to call this magic things like magnetism, but honestly, they're pretty much the same thing. These stirring rods are just bar magnets wrapped in plastic, which get pushed around when the magnetic field underneath them rotates. When I first saw these, I expected them to do something fancy, like selectively energizing electromagnet coils, like how an actual electric motor works. But when I looked into it more, I realized that all they're doing is using a motor to spin a bar magnet right underneath the surface, which is a lot simpler and works for our purposes better. So that's pretty much what we're going to do for this project. We're just going to make one of those electric stirrers for chemicals, but in the form factor of a wine glass. So to make up the actual device, we're going to have this clear plastic cup that's going to hold all our wine to get stirred. Underneath that, we're going to have a sort of a cylinder to make up the rest of the cup. That's going to be our housing for all our other components, which are one of these small DC motors. It doesn't have to be very strong. Then we're going to have some wires to connect everything, a battery pack just needed to power, a switch, maybe not necessarily this kind of switch, but just any small switch to turn it on and off will be fine. And then finally, the part that's going to make all of this work is one of these variety packs of stirrer rods I got off of Amazon. I'm going to be able to use this both in the cup to stir the wine itself, as well as strap one of these to the motor shaft to be the bar magnet that propels the whole system. Before we start actually putting this whole thing together, I just want to do a test to make sure that it actually works. I'm just going to strap this big stirring rod to the motor shaft and hold the cup over it and hope it works. I don't expect it to not work. There's not a lot that can fail here, but I've definitely been wrong before. So let's try this out. First, I just have to put the batteries in. We're using two AA batteries, which is about 1.5 volts each for a total of 3 volts. Then I just connect the switch in series with the battery pack. I'm going to attach some lead wires to the motor to make it easier to alligator clip onto them. And connect the other end to the motor, and that's pretty much it for our simple circuit. Now, and I put this magnet on, flops around a bit, but it does finally get coupled, and then we can see it spinning beautifully right here. This is exactly what we want. So I decided to 3D print an adapter that would connect this stirring rod onto the motor shaft, because as we saw in that little demo, taping it just wasn't very sturdy. So I tried this sort of design. It's got the little bit for the stirring rod up here that will slot into, and then it's got this hole for the motor shaft. But the first time didn't work because the hole was too small. So I enlarged both this gap and the slot on the bottom, and it still wasn't big enough. So third time's the charm. This shaft hole should be big enough, and I enlarged the hole on top. So now we can see that this will fit nicely into that. I have a little notch for this so it doesn't slide, and then that will go neatly onto this. So it's a little bit loose, but yeah, that adapter should work well. So I'm just going to glue this up real fast, and then we'll give it another test. Now we need a frame to hold the rest of the cup components together. I initially tried making it out of wood, but it was taking more work than I anticipated and didn't look how I wanted, so I decided to 3D print the frame instead, figuring I could also use the practice 3D modeling and printing custom parts. So I think this actually turned out great. I just want to put everything on and make sure everything fits. So I just want to attach the button, and then we'll attach the battery pack on the back, and we're going to attach the motor into here, and then the cup, and then whatever else we need to. Yeah, so I think that works pretty well. So when you fit this in here, it's just should fit right between these wires. Hopefully I left enough space here. Yeah, I think that'll work. It's a little tight, but that should be all right. So that's going to fit in here. I'm going to attach that to the back of the housing. This is going to go around and connect to the battery casing, which is going to be on the back here. And then we're just going to attach the cup on the top. So that'll be great. A lot easier than using wood. So I connected everything very haphazardly just to see if this whole thing would work. And it does. It does spin when you press the button. But the problem, and what I didn't account for, is that this motor is only being held by tension on the mount. And so what happens is when it vibrates, oh, well, that's just it touching the top. But when it vibrates, it actually will vibrate itself loose if you use it for long enough. So I didn't really account for that. I'm going to have to put some sort of fixture on that to keep the motor in place, and then I'm going to have to secure all these wires. So that's the next step. But it does It does work. So far we've created this frame to hold the button, the motor, the magnet, and the battery, and now we just need a couple extra body pieces to complete the whole wine glass look. So I printed this stem here that's gonna go on the bottom of this, and we just need some extra pieces to attach this to that. And I didn't have the foresight to print a mount on the bottom of this, so we're gonna have to make a new one. I printed these initially. This was gonna clamp onto it and then go on the bottom like this, but I realized that I printed this wrong and I added a bunch of supports on the bottom there, which it proved really, really difficult to get out. So I decided to scrap that and I reprinted that entirely. So this is the one on the bottom. I just made this flat so I could print it flat. And then this one on top, I just got rid of the stair-step pattern so I could print that flat as well. So we can attach those right here, and that should be able to stick this on and mount that. Cool, so now that that is mounted, we can mount the actual stem on it. I made this a lot smaller than the previous one because the other one just kind of rattled around. But this one, I put these holes in there in case you needed to secure it, but really, I think we might just be able to wedge it in there. That looks good to me. Now we can begin working on the actual wiring for this to make sure it works, and we just need to put the glass on top and we should be done. So now that this is assembled, we just need to attach the wiring, which I've done here temporarily just to make sure this works before I actually solder everything in. So I have this very expensive wine glass that cost a lot of money, definitely, and I have the magnetic stirrer rod to match with the other one, and these should magnetically link, and so when I press this, it should start, yep, it should start the other one spinning without touching it. Now what I'm noticing is that the bottom of this wine glass is actually convex, and so like there's a bit of a dome shape, and so what happens when this starts spinning, it actually spins around the cup, and then it just jumps off the side. So hopefully it's not going to do that when we have some liquid in here. But another thing I'm noticing is that, oh, well, that was okay. But what happens is that when if this thing is spinning at full speed and this is not, this is moving too fast for this to magnetically link to it. So we would almost need to stop and then start it up again in order to get this going. So hopefully we don't run into that problem when there's liquid in here. For the time being, I'm gonna solder all of this up and make it look nice. I'm gonna leave a space in here just in case we need to add some sort of speed controller. I really don't want to have to, but we're gonna see if we need to. And I'm just gonna leave a little space just for that, but it should be pretty easy.
It was a lot of trouble. It was way more trouble than I expected it to be. So I had hoped that when you put actual liquid in the glass that it would prevent the magnet from just flying all over the place. And it did, but it did that a little too well. What actually happened when you put the magnet in there is that the water, it would get off track, it would lose magnetic coupling with the magnet mounted to the motor, and it would just kind of stop spinning. And the bottom magnet would be going too fast for the top one to catch up and recouple to it. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll just slow the magnet down. That way it won't lose traction as much. But I can't exactly put a gearbox on. I've already cemented everything. I can't do that. So okay, I'll just do it electronically. So I'll just make a PWM controller because I thought, okay, that's how you slow down a motor. That's easy. Well, so I made the PWM controller. I'm using a 555 timer here to generate a PWM signal based on this potentiometer here. And then I have this MOSFET. I had to get a new MOSFETs for this because my other BJTs weren't working. So I got this working, and this works with a regular motor. But the problem is that I've already got batteries on this thing. And I was using 2 batteries for that. That's 3 volts. 2 alkaline batteries is 3 volts. And the 555 timer requires a minimum of 4.5 volts. So I couldn't run the timer off of those 2 batteries, and I was certainly not going to add a second battery pack. So I kind of had to nix the whole PWM idea, and I thought, okay, that's when I realized the solution was kind of staring me in the face the whole time. I immediately jumped onto a PWM controller. I thought that's how you slow down a motor. That's the best way to slow down or speed up a DC motor, is just to use pulse width modulation, right? Well, I realized there was a much dumber solution that was right there. It's just lower the voltage. So You might have already seen this. I'm just using one battery now. I had two connected here, and I thought, well, I'll just use one. It'll slow down. It'll slow down the motor speed, and it did slow down the motor speed. I've just shorted them out right now. This is not the permanent wiring. This is just what I've done so far, but it slowed it down a lot. It actually, well, I'll let you see how it works. So as you can see, this, well, it's a little finicky, but you probably can't notice it on the video, but this is actually a lot slower than it was before because it literally has half the voltage. So I took my wine glass, I put some water in there, and okay, it couples all right. But watch what happens when you start to spin it. Okay, well that's going to work well, but you saw what happened there at the end. Watch this. It starts to work. It starts to get that whirlpool, and then it just goes off kilter. It loses magnetic coupling. And I thought, okay, well, I either need, well, but first I thought, well, I either need to slow this down more, or I need a stronger magnet on here, because the professional stirring plates have really strong magnets, but I don't have another magnet. This is already on there. I don't want to rebuild this whole thing. I was really close to rebuilding the whole thing again, regardless. And then I realized, I thought, I'll try my first cup once again. I'll try it again. I'm using the smaller, a little bit smaller magnet, but watch, the first cup I ever used is a flat bottom. It is a plastic cup. And there we go. That is working perfectly as intended. You see the whirlpool there? The bottom magnet is being spun by the motor, and it's spinning the top magnet, which is swirling the liquid around. That is exactly what it's going to do, and it's going to stir our wine or whatever kind of drink we have in here. Beautiful. All those oxygen bubbles, that's perfect. So the solution the entire time was just take one of the batteries out, use half the voltage, and then just use a cup with a flat bottom in it. That's all it is. So I'm going to get rid of this jerry-rigged wire. I'm going to actually properly wire it up in a more permanent way, and then attach the cup, and we'll see how this looks next. And there you are, ladies and gentlemen, a wine glass that stirs itself. It's really easy. Just put in your beverage of choice, hit the button, and it will begin perfectly swirling your wine. Don't you just feel elegant, rich, and fancy already? This was way easier than just doing that with your cup. I'm so glad we did this. Bam. Perfectly aerated wine every time. Now this is a little bit more top heavy than I expected, but you know that's okay because we did it and it works. That looks like a bobblehead right now. That's unnerving.